to spend learning a little bit more about the financial reporter. And before we begin today's session, just be curious just to know, just the raising hands, how many people have had a chance to work in the financial reporter before. If you just want to click the raise hand button on your control panel, and I see lots of hands going up, so that's wonderful to know, just so we get a feeling for how many people this is new for and how many people have had some experience. So that's great. So if you want to click the hand button again to lower them, that would be fabulous. Thank you. Today's session is just a little bit more about continuing on some of the basics from that we do introduce in the basic level of the financial reporter. Some of the things that we plan on showing today is talking a little bit about account groups. We've seen in the past about how to create a financial statement by dragging an account group to the blank sheet. And so we'll just talk a little bit about what an account group is and how to set that up. And we'll talk a little bit more about some things you can do with Smart Sheets and being able to quickly create financial statements from your account groups and have some additional things available for the types of statements you might want to do or just doing investigation. We'll talk a little bit about something called call spec format, just a different way of organizing the formulas and just what exactly a call spec format actually means on a financial statement, and some of the things that you can do in a financial statement when you have that setting set up. If you have a financial statement that you've been working on, you realize you need to add a new column or add a new row, and you just want to be able to, instead of having to start from scratch, just some of the easy ways that you can do for adding columns, either fields from the database or some common formulas if you want to do some calculations on a financial statement and include numbers that aren't stored in the database. A very simple step, how to just add a company logo and some of the things to watch out for when you do that, just for formatting reasons. And finally, we'll take a look at how to ensure that you've got all the appropriate accounts that you want on your financial statement and ways that you can check to find out whether any accounts are missing that you wanted to have on the form or perhaps even where accounts might be duplicated on the form, and make sure that accounts are in the appropriate place within a financial statement. So that's what we plan on covering today. There's quite a lot there. So why don't we just get into it? We won't worry about doing any more PowerPoint slides. And I'll be demonstrating using the version of Adagio Ledger 9.0C, which is the current shipping version of Adagio Ledger. The financial statement designer is very similar if you're using Adagio FX, and in fact we've just released, I think in the last week, a new version of Adagio FX, version 9.0A, and that includes all of the new things, a number of new things in the financial statement designer that previously hadn't been there but had already been in the Ledger financial statement designer. So now they should be in sync again. And so just out of curiosity, just for raise of hands, how many people in the audience today are Adagio FX users as opposed to Adagio Ledger? Just be curious, just from a show of hands, how many people use FX? Well, there's a few, so that's great to know. So if you see a couple of new buttons in your new FX, then just to be aware that everything that you see in the financial reporter now will be applicable to Adagio FX. Some used to be the case where, oh, this button isn't an FX yet. Now, in fact, it is. So you can be sure that everything's up to date and in sync now that we've released a new version of FX. So why don't we just launch the financial reporter, and we'll start with our blank sheet. I'd maybe like to do, before we get started, just actually ask a quick poll. For those of you, many of you have had opportunities to use the financial reporter before, and so I'd just be curious to know, for those of you who are in the audience today, how do you create financial statements, or what's your sort of experience working with a financial statement designer? And any and all of those that apply for you, if you just want to select your check boxes, and just so we can see a bit of about sort of what level of experience you've had in using the financial statement designer. And for some of you, other might mean you never had really the chance to use it before. So I'll just wait until a few more people get a chance to cast their ballots. It's a much more fun ballot than perhaps the midterms from yesterday. All right, so why don't we just close the session, and for the people who are in the audience today, many of you have had a chance to modify sample reports, and also all the other different ways of things you can do, whether it's just converting or just creating it completely from scratch, or bringing it from Excel. So there's lots of different ways that people have chosen to use this, so that's wonderful to know. So there's a vast amount of experience. One way that we advertise, an easy way of creating a financial statement from scratch, is to being able to access the view account groups and drag one of these account groups to a blank sheet. And it looks very magical. So what exactly does it mean to create and what an account group is, and how to set one up so that it matches the kind of things that you want to do? Essentially, an account group is just a way of oops, not that one. Is organizing your chart of accounts, and basically an account group is a title and some sections and some subsections, kind of like a tree, and eventually your sections will also include being able to associate accounts. A very simple way of grouping your accounts together is the standard types of account groupings, or assets or liabilities, income, expenses, and retained earnings. And within a particular grouping, you might want to reorganize each of those assets into particular types of assets, cash or accounts receivable and so forth, and associate accounts with those. And similarly for liabilities and income and so forth, there may be different types of income or different types of liabilities that you might want to be able to group together into subtotal. So that's essentially what an account group is that you just have a title and you want to select a certain number of accounts, or perhaps all of them, and organize them in such a way those would be the rows on a financial statement. Now you can organize the information in an account group that looks like a financial statement. For example, a balance sheet type account group would organize all of the assets in one section, and the liabilities and the shareholders' equity, and all of the P&L accounts, all of the income statement accounts, all summarized together in a single row, and that could be your profit or loss. A balance sheet account group could look very simple like this, or it could be very complicated so that it's very specific where accounts go and the sequence that they're presented and so forth. An income statement account group could be created. You don't have to create all of the accounts within an account group. You can just pick and choose. So in this particular example, an income statement looking account group would simply select the appropriate income and expense accounts and then grouped perhaps in the way that you would prefer. So you'd have your two sections, income, expenses, and then within the income there'd be a separation, and in the expenses there's some separation between the different types of expenses and costs and so forth. This is a very simple looking income statement, and here's a somewhat more complicated looking one where the particular sales are grouped and subcategorized in a very particular way in a very particular sequence. Typically what we recommend is that if you're creating financial statements from scratch, make your account groups relatively straightforward and simple. You can always make modifications to the spreadsheet once it's been created from the drag and drop from the account group. You don't have to specifically set up everything to make it perfect 100%. You can always move rows around or split things up or copy and paste rows or copy and paste columns to get what you need or to change the title. You can always do those sorts of things in the spreadsheet after you've done the drag and drop. It's probably a lot easier to do a more generic income statement or a more generic balance sheet or a more generic type of account grouping, and then just make the tweaks that you need to for your completed financial statement. So how do you go about creating an account group? Let's just spend a couple minutes doing that. If you're going to create a brand new one, the very first thing to do is to actually create the top level group, and the way to do that is to right click on the company name, and you'll be given the opportunity to create a new group or a new range. A range is where you associate the accounts, and that's the bottom level. The group could be the top level, the second level, the third level, anywhere with the exception of the very bottom level. So it's the way that you do your hierarchy of your accounts and how you group them together and subtotal them together. To start with, we'll create a new group because that's going to be the top level. When it comes time to adding a new group, you'll be given some opportunities. So let's just do a very simple, oops. This will be what the title of the financial statement will be. When you drag it over, this name will be at the top of the list. Whenever you create a new group, there's some additional options. Do you want to have a subtotal line that gets inserted at the bottom of the group and all the things that are within that group? Do you want to be able to add this name as a title somewhere? And we're going to choose yes to that. If you have different groups like income expenses or different types of things where the information you might want to have print on separate pages, you can always add a page break before this group begins to print on the financial statement. So that's always an option for you. It doesn't make much sense, obviously, at this stage and on the first level group, but certainly you can add them at their second level or your third level groups. Styles are basically fonts. Do you want to have it Times New Roman or Arial or Verdana, and do you want to have it bold or italic or what size? You can choose predefined settings from the styles, or you can create your own. Typically, I don't worry about changing these styles when you're creating the financial statement groups. You can always change the fonts quite easily on the spreadsheet itself, and it's probably not worth the hassle of picking things here. But if it's interesting to you to always do this type of font with this financial statement and a different font and a different financial statement, you can always do that sort of thing through the account groups. So when I click OK to save, you'll see that we have a top-level group that's been added to our list. And now what we can do is add in the next level. An income statement, of course, typically is broken into two sections, income and expenses. If we just want to simply dump all of our income statement accounts, all of our revenue, all of the other income, all those sorts of things, and just have them organized in one section and then have some sort of total, then what I could do if I wanted to is to say new range and then associate all of my income accounts together without any ability of separating the income into further groupings. If I want to be able to show this type of income and then that type of income and then another type of income and then have subtotals for each of those types of income, then what I would want to do instead is pick a new group and create a new group for each of those different types of income and then further break down. If I want to, at this point, say I just want to have one type of income, another type of income without further down breakdowns, then I can choose a new range. As we take a look at the example that we have up here, the income has been set up, and then within the income there will be two ranges associated with two different types of income. So why don't we mimic setting this one up, showing the income that we see above. So what we'll first do is create a new group, and we'll just do just the income. And we'll have the word income as a subheader. And it would be interesting to see a total for all of our income accounts summed together. So we can see our total amount. Within the income, we want to break down into certain types of income. We'll do a revenue and other income and expenses. And you can see that in this case, this will be the lowest level. Maybe you don't need to have revenue and then revenue from sales or revenue from consulting or revenue from annual maintenance plans, or you could certainly choose to create groups that do that sort of thing, or you can just simply create a simple range that incorporates all of your revenue. Of course, if you choose to want to be able to break out your revenue into separate sections later, you can always do so in the spreadsheet. This isn't your one and only chance to get it set up correctly. So why don't we just do a simple breaking out the revenue all in a single row. So at this point, we'll create a new range. And you'll see that the new range screen looks a little bit different than the grouping. Not only would you indicate the name, but you also here indicate the chart of account numbers. Don't worry about departments. Those aren't associated here. It's strictly the account numbers that you deal with in account groups. And you give the account numbering scheme. You could do a single account if you wanted to, or you could do a range of accounts. To indicate a range, you use a colon to separate your starting and ending account. If you don't have everything in a nice set of consecutive accounts, you can always go 4,000 to 4,499, comma 4,600, comma 4,700 to 47.99 and 49.50 or 49.60. So you can certainly create a non-contiguous set of accounts. I'll just put some spaces there just to make it a bit easier to see. so that you can say, these are all my revenue counts that I want to sum together, and they don't have to all be nicely consecutive. You can certainly take particular groupings. When creating a range, you may want to indicate whether it's a balance sheet or income statement or retained earnings, just so that it identifies that the accounts here match up with the type of account you're dealing with. It's also interesting to do this because if you choose balance sheet or income statement, you can see down here below there's a checkbox that could be either liability or revenue. And the purpose of this checkbox is that liabilities or revenues are stored as negative numbers or net credits in your financial data. And if you want to have your revenue show as a positive amount on your financial statement, or your liabilities print as a positive number, then you click this checkbox, and when the financial statement is created, this setting will automatically put in a minus sign in the formula so that it flips the sign of the amount on your spreadsheet, and that negative number will instead be displayed as a positive number. If you want to have a subtotal for all of your revenue, well, there's another option that the financial statement designer will automatically put that in for you. And lastly, you can have the revenue always be summarized and not prevent the ability of breaking down the revenue into different accounts. Or you can choose to enable detail, and that allows you to take your revenue and break it out into separate accounts. And you can choose to have one row per account, or if you are in a departmentalized ledger and you want to have one row per account department pair, so each account department is on a separate row, you can use this option called Show Detail Lines. If you choose to summarize to account and you use departmentalization, then all of your departments will be summed together, and the sum of all of the departments within the account will be shown in the numeric cells. Or if you want to be able to use the department drop-down, summarize to account will look at the department drop-down from the toolbar and choose to print just the department or the departments that have been selected there. So summarize to account is a standard method for being able to use the toolbar from the drop-down so that you can choose either consolidated or departmentalized financial statement. And this is a way that you'll typically see the sample account groups, and this is often a nice one to start with. If you want to take a form and change it to show account department pairs, it's very easy to do so in the financial statement itself. So again, this is another example of one of those settings that you don't have to worry about getting it right. You can just kind of pick one. It's a simpler one, and you can make the changes as required to the financial statement. So once we've done all these settings and say OK, that will create the account range within the account group, and you can see that there's a little icon with some pictures next to the title, and that little picture indicates the settings that you've chosen. If I right-click, the Summarize to Account setting or Show Detail Lines, because one of those is selected, you'll see a little blue line meaning Show Details. Include Total Line is selected, so therefore you see a little black bar which indicates that the Include Total Line has been selected. And because we're choosing to flip the signs, and this is a revenue type range, that's the purpose of that little red dash is in the middle there, because that means that you're going to flip the sign for the account. So you can do another range for a different set of accounts. Right-click on the income and add another new range. So other income perhaps. And let's say that you don't know the chart of accounts that are associated with that. You can leave that blank and then come back to it later if you wish. If you're leaving that blank now, it's not a problem. And you'll notice that all of the previous settings from the previous account range that we created has been selected for you. So at this point I can say OK, and then I can go into my ledger, or I can go to my view chart of accounts and say, well, which ones are my other income and expenses? Here's my income accounts, and so you can take a look and see which ones are the appropriate ones. And you can see that the other income would be the 7,000 ranges. So then I can come back here, and I can then go into the properties. If you want to edit a account range or an account group, you can right-click and choose Properties, and then you can go back in and type in the range. And so that's now saved. Or let me just edit the properties and delete that. Another thing you can do is with the View Chart of Accounts open, I can multi-select all of those accounts, or I can Control-click Control-click if you want to pick random ones, and drag them over. And when you drop it on the account range, it will create the appropriate account range syntax for you. So this is, again, another easy way. If you have accounts that you want to put together into a range and they're not necessarily pretty and you're not quite sure the syntax, you want to make sure that you don't pick the wrong, you forget to put in a colon or a comma and so forth, or not quite sure what the syntax is for separating the accounts, then what you can do is you can cherry pick the appropriate accounts, drag them and drop them into your range, and the financial reporter will automatically build the appropriate range in the most efficient way for you. Typically, when you create these ranges, oops, I didn't mean to delete that. I don't know why I did that. So let's just do the range. Typically, what you want to do when you create these ranges is to incorporate all the possible account numbers that have been reserved, not necessarily the ones that have been created. Because when it comes time to creating a new account, you can have new accounts that you create automatically add to your financial statements as long as they fall within the predefined ranges. And so if we happen to add 7,700 as a new account, because that falls within one of our predefined ranges, that will automatically get added to our account group range, and it will automatically get added to the financial statement if you use a smart sheet. So you don't have to worry about copying and pasting rows in the future. So that's why it's useful to automatically put in all of the account ranges in something like this to show all the possible accounts that might not only currently exist in your chart of accounts, but also what might potentially exist in the future if you need to add new accounts. Finally, you can also copy and paste from existing account groups. So if you've already got an expenses section set up for one account group and you just want to copy it as is to a new account group that you're creating, you can always right-click and say copy, and then let's paste it within our demo income statement. So let's paste the expenses section. And so it pasted the expenses group and all of the account ranges itself. So if you've already got sample ones set up and you just want to copy them and make minor tweaks to the title or to the account range, you can certainly do so. You don't have to create them all from scratch. So let's create a new financial statement using these particular settings. Again, as we know from the basic, all you need to do is to highlight and click on the top level group, and that will select not only the group but all of the subgroups and all of the sub-ranges within it, and then drag it over and drop it into our financial statement designer. We've told the financial statement designer what the layout is as far as the titles and the rows and how they're organized and what subtotals you want. Now we need to tell the columns, and by default the description is always selected for you. Now it's just a matter of selecting the other appropriate columns. So why don't we do a very simple one just to start with? Why don't we do the year-to-date and the selected month? And once we selected those columns, then we have the opportunity of choosing to have all of those titles, things like printed as of October 31st, 2010, income statement, so forth. Those sorts of things are automatically added with add titles. And many of these others are self-explanatory. We'll discuss a couple of the other features in just a moment. You can also change the column order now, or you can do it later on the financial statement. So when I say OK, what we should see is that here's some titles, your company name and the title of our account group. Let's just muse those together. So you can see that the account group title has been put here. You can see the income and expenses, first level, or sorry, the second level groups there. Within the income, you can see the revenue and the other income titles from here and the appropriate account numbers, and same thing for the expenses. And then all of the numbers were selected based on the columns later on. If you recognize at this point that you didn't really want to have all of your other income be able to be expanded onto one row per account, you really just like to keep it as a summary, all I need to do is to delete the dot range, and that's what controls whether a row will be able to show details. When I expand, you can see now that the other income remains as a summary. Or if I want to make it show details again, I can right-click and say Make Range and expand, and now I get that back. Or if we want to be able to show one row per account and department pair, I can change that backwards apostrophe to a star. And now when I expand, you can see that I've been able to change the way that the amounts are broken out into one row per account department pair, not just one row per account. So you notice I didn't have to make the account group setting perfect the way I wanted it to. You can always make changes to the specification after you've dropped it into a blank sheet such as this. So, and if I want to change that back, I can just use the backwards apostrophe, shift backwards apostrophe. There we go. And now when I expand, now I get back to one row per account. So that's the way that account groups can be set up. Again, what I've done is a very simple example. Again, you don't have to do very complicated account groups. You can just simply do standard organization such as this, and you can always do copy and pasting and adding new columns or adding new rows or changing fonts and so forth is what you are required. It's easier to delete than it is to add. A couple other types of smart sheets that you might potentially want to create. Well, let's just do a view in account groups. And an example of something else that you might want to do is to do a departmental comparative. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to compare my year-to-date from some of my departments that have been set up in my accounting data. If I'd like to be able to have one column per department and have my accounts as rows and my departments as columns and be able to do that kind of matrix, then what I can do is choose, when I do this drag and drop, the departmental comparative. If I choose this, then I also have the ability of, for all of my numeric columns that I've selected, I can choose I want that department, that department, that department, and they don't have to be all consecutive. You also have the opportunity, if you've created department ranges or department masks, to select those as well. So essentially, for every selected department, that will create a column. I can also choose to add an additional column that adds together all of my entire company departments, whether or not I've selected them here below. Or I can choose, if I wish, to sum together all of the departments that I have selected and give it some sort of description. Sum of departments. This is something simple. If there's a reason why all of these departments that I've selected have some sort of meaning, then you can give that sort of appropriate title for what we have here. And then I can reorganize the sum and the individual columns for each of the departments if I wish, or I can just choose to leave them now, and I can certainly drag them around and move them from the form itself. Now when I say OK, again, it dropped over a financial statement, and now what we see here is we have all of our accounts as rows. We've got our 3 selected departments as columns, and then a 4th column that shows the sum. And then when I expand the sheet, now I have, again, 1 row per account, and then I've got my 3 columns for the 3 departments and the sum and all the individual amounts. If I want to be able to make sure that I can have all those things fit on one page width-wise, I can multi-select by control-clicking all 4 of those columns and change the width of one of them. And whenever you multi-select columns and change the width of one, it will automatically resize all the same columns that have been selected to match what you've done there. So that's a quick way of resizing columns. If I wanted to have that sum over here on the left-hand side rather than the right, I can choose to drag the column and drop it over here. So you can drag and drop columns or rows, very simple in the Financial Reporter, depending on where you require them. So if I preview this, you can see here's our consolidated form for our departments. So you need to make that column a little bit wider. Or if I expand the sheet and preview, you can see all of our departmental comparatives. If you use departments and you would like to be able to create a financial statement that sums together a number of non-consecutive departments, you aren't able to do this from the drop-down, but notice what we have here is a sum of departments that are non-consecutive. So this is a way that you're able to say, I want to sum together departments A, B, and X, and they're not consecutive, but they have meaning to me. So you could do this type of drag and drop where we've selected our specific departments. We've added a column that sums them together. You can always hide or hide when printed all of these individual departments. I chose hide when printed here. So now when I preview the form, now all I have is the one column that shows the summed departments together. So if you want to say, be able to create a financial statement that says, I want to sum together these particular departments, they're not consecutive, how's the easiest way of doing that? Well, what we've shown you now is the easiest way. To just drag them from the account groups, do the departmental comparative, pick a column that says sum them together, and then hide all of the individual ones. If you realize, oops, I really meant to do 200, not 150, I can certainly type in the new code here and F9 to refresh. And you can see that the formula here that adds together all the text for the different department codes have been done here, and then all these numbers will be recalculated, including the descriptions. So that's a relatively simple way. If you're interested in seeing the formula, it's a little bit complicated, but in general, there's a function in the financial report called range merge, RNG merge, that says find all the accounts in one cell, find all the departments from another cell, and it could be one, or it could be multiple accounts or multiple departments, and find all the combinations of all those accounts, departments, and then add them together to get our number here. And so that's a way that you can try to do a number of non-consecutive accounts or non-consecutive departments and do a way of being able to generate a number for that. Instead of having to guess how to code or syntax that particular formula, what we've done for the drag and drop is probably the easiest way of doing that for you. Let's do one more example of a financial statement. Let's say that you're not actually doing a financial statement per se, but you'd like to do some analysis about your expenses, for example. You like to see where your expenses are going to within your accounts, within your different departments. What you can do is drag. You don't have to drag the entire group. You can say maybe just drag the expenses section and all of the ranges within that and drop it. And let's say that you'd like to see your year-to-date actual, and maybe also your, oops, not that one, the year-to-date budget, just see how they're doing. And what you can do is compare those together and just see how your expenses are doing compared to those. And so this could just be an analysis where you can say, here's all of my expenses in my budget, and just figure out how they're doing. Let's just collapse that. And actually what I'll do is I'll just do a new sheet. It's probably the easiest thing to do, insert worksheet. Or if I want to do it over across months rather than just the year, and just see on a month-by-month basis how you're doing. Let's just clear all of my selections. What I can do also is show the specific periods. And an easy way of selecting a whole bunch of fields is just to click on the name for the first one, hold down the Shift key, and click on the last one to multi-select all 12, and press the space bar to select all those checkboxes. Now what we've got is all of our 12 months for a particular fiscal year. And now what we have is a month-by-month analysis of all of our costs and expenses. And if you want to hide all those 0 rows just to make it a little bit easier to see, then now we have all of the accounts that have had expenses or costs in the year, either for 2007 or 2008. Oh, there's nothing done quite yet for that fiscal year. Maybe 2006, you can see different amounts. So this is just a way of doing some analysis on a particular set of accounts, perhaps. And you can do this overall, or you can do it just for specific departments. So if you want to analyze your costs from one department and compare them to a different department, that's something that's available to do as well. So there's an example of some types of smart sheets that you could potentially do. Coming back here, let's just talk a little bit about a different type of layout of financial statements. You'll notice that this particular form and many of the other ones that we've already created have had something here called call spec. And essentially what a call spec is it allows simpler formulas to be used for grabbing your financial data from your database. And a call spec is formatted hide when printed. So that means that this blue row doesn't print. And basically all the call spec does is saying, here's the title. Basically it's like a title. It appears above all of your numbers, and it's a place where you can put in your field codes, so it's easier to maintain. If we take a look at a formula for grabbing a financial number on a call spec, we'll use a formula that grabs the field code from some cell above it. So in cell D7, you can see D7's got the field code. And it will grab the account or range of accounts from cell B10, which you can see is over here. And what you can do here is with a call spec, if you just want to change the field code, so instead of budget year or date, maybe I want just the current month, I can just simply type in the letter M and press the Enter key, and you can see that it changed the title and all of the amounts associated with it. Or if you want to change it to the full year budget, that's B, and you can just type in Enter and say, okay, that's great. Or if I want to compare it to last year, type in LY, and there's last year. Or last year, year to date. Or if you're not quite sure what field codes to do, you can always go to the View Account Data and find out what the codes are for you here. So it's very easy to be able to do that sort of thing. Something else you can do with a call spec is if you want to be able to compare year to date against perhaps a number of other different types of fields, we maybe want to compare it to last year, year to date, or budget year to date, depending on what you're interested in. What you can do is you can pull up your View Account Data, and you can drag one of these fields and drop it on the cell. And now what we've done is we've put a little drop down into the cell, so you can just pick from what you want in the list. So if you want to pick budget year to date and hit the Enter key, all the numbers will be based on that. Or if you want to compare it to last year, year to date, just select it from the drop down and say OK, and the numbers will recalculate. So this is a way of being able to do some comparisons, not only for the summarized, but you can also do it for the expanded form as well. Sometimes year to date or this month isn't too interesting. Let's just insert a row. What might be interesting to see is, well, what are the actual amounts that are associated with this? In a call spec, you can add in formulas that will automatically do those, what the beginning and the ending dates are for you. In a call spec, if you right-click on a cell underneath the call spec row, it will automatically wake up a section that you can insert from the right-click pop-up menu called Account Information, and you can insert an amount field or the description field, or amount if you just want to do separate debit and credit columns, or you can also put in period start or period end. And so if I pick period start here, right-click, insert formula, account information, period end. Now you can see, and maybe what we'll do is I'll just make those center aligned. Now what you can see is the date range based on what this field code is. So if I highlight that and copy it and paste it here, then those numbers are representative of the starting and the ending of your fiscal calendar for the field codes that are above. If we wanted to select last year, year to date, and press Enter, now you can see that the dates are based on the last year's fiscal period, and those automatically update for you. So if it's easier to say, instead of year to date, if you want to actually have the date ranges of the numbers, you can have those in. Or you can have just the ending date if you wish, too. So call specs makes it easier to say, well, if you select a field code, not only will it change the numbers, but you can also more easily see the dates associated with the particular column, whether it's a month or 3 months ago or last year or next year or anything else like that. Okay. Let's continue modifying this very simple form. We've got a column that has year to date and last year to date, and we've got all of our expenses. Well, why don't we add in a new column that says, well, I want to figure out, I want to have another column that shows my current month. And we forgot to add it, but we've done some work on this. We don't want to do it from scratch again. A very easy way to add a new database field is to highlight an existing one. And there's an option called duplicate column, and basically what that does is we'll copy a column and paste it to the right. So if I choose duplicate column here, you see it copied the entire column, all the formatting, all the formulas, and then all I have to do is just to change the field code up above, hit the Enter key, and that will automatically change the amounts here, and also the dates. So I can do comparisons for different dates or different fiscal periods or different years. So that's a very easy way to add a new column into a financial statement, is to just highlight an existing one and choose duplicate column, and that will allow you to copy all the formatting and so forth, as well as the formulas, and it's very easy to make a change as far as having the numbers update to something new. You can also do the same sort of thing with a row as well. If I want to duplicate rows, that's also available. A reason I might want to do that is, let's say that I want to split up the cost of sales into two different types of costs, and you didn't have those separate ranges set up before. It's very easy to right-click, duplicate row, and then maybe change your account ranges. So maybe I want all of the 5800s up to there, and only the 5900 accounts in a separate range. And when I press F9, those will update, and then I can expand to show those. Maybe you have different fonts, or maybe only the 5900 accounts don't get expanded, so you can certainly set up a way where you have certain accounts get expanded and other sets of accounts not. So there's the things that you can do for duplicating rows as well. Let's just delete that, put this back. F9 that. So there's some examples of easy ways and quick ways to duplicate columns or rows to add new information to a form for particular purposes. The next thing I'd like to investigate a little bit is how to add formula rows, and we'll show you just a couple of different ones that you can do. One very simple formula would be a variance column. For example, we've got a year-to-date, and we've got a column that we can choose either the last year-to-date or the budget year-to-date, and it may be interesting to find out what the difference between the two of them are. So why don't we create a new column that has the variance associated with the difference between these two columns. So how would you go about doing that? Well, again, it's always easier to copy an existing formula and duplicate it, because it already copies the formulas and all the formatting as well. What we can do is give it a new title called variance, and just like in Excel, well, what would be the formula? We could do actual minus this, or the other way around. So why don't we do year-to-date minus this column? So the cell formatting would be equals E12 minus F12, or F minus E if that's what you wanted to have. And you notice that it now has the ability to calculate that for you, F9 for the subtotal. And I can also copy this and paste it, paste to the different rows. Notice that I collapsed the form in order to make this change. If I were to have done all that copying and pasting with the form expanded, I would have actually lost all of this, because in a Smart Sheet, generated rows are deleted when a form is collapsed. And so if I do any copying and pasting or creating formulas on this view, when it's expanded and you've got generate rows here in column A, all of this information that I create, whether it's formatting or formulas, will get lost as soon as I collapse the row, because all those generated rows are deleted. So always make changes to your financial statement, whether it's adding new columns or changing formatting or fonts or so on. Do that sort of thing with the form collapsed. And as you obviously saw here, this information for the variance is automatically calculated, the cell referencing for each row. So you got your variances based on the information here. And obviously we don't need this particular cell, so we can clear the contents just so it's not so confusing. And then if we wanted to compare that to the budget, oops, I guess I can't do that with those cells. Those don't make sense, so let's just delete those. So what you can see here now is that when you select our information here, that will update not only that column but also our formula columns as well. So that's an example of a fairly simple formula where we're doing all of the cells, we're adding or subtracting or multiplying or whatever, all the rows, cells are in the same row. Let's do an example of another formula that is a little more complicated, and just to show you some of the things to watch out for if you would like to do a formula that refers to cells in a different row. For example, percentage of total. So maybe it would be interesting to see for our range of accounts, which cost of accounts, what percentage of that account makes up the total costs, or what percentage of the expense makes up the total expenses. So why don't we create a new formula column that generates a percentage of total. So again, it's easier to duplicate a column, get all your formatting, and we'll delete all this, and we'll get those numbers in a moment. And we'll change this to percentage of total. And what's the formula? Well, it will be what the account is divided by the total. So that's a very simple formula. Equals E12 divided by F12. Oops. Or dividing by 0. Oops. E13, wrong one. There we go. So there's our 100%, and we can format that as a percentage on our form here. Oops, percentage. And when we expand, oops, what happened here? Well, if we take a look at the generated rows when we expanded, it copied all the cell referencing. You can see that what we're dividing by is also getting updated as well, and that's causing a huge issue. We're not dividing by the right number. So whenever you do a formula where you're referring to a cell that's in a different row than where the formula is being entered, this formula is entered in row 12, and we're referring to a cell in row 13, what we need to do is to put in a $sign in front of the information that we don't want to get updated, so that when we expand the form, this particular information won't move to a different place. This $sign thing is exactly how it works in Excel if you're used to that. When I expand the sheet, now we can see that the numbers look a whole lot better. Our cost of sales total down here is in row 28. And if we take a look at all of the cells as we go down the list, we can see that we're always dividing by the cell value that's in row 28. But what we're dividing is updating as appropriate. So why don't we go ahead and copy this formula here. You can use Control-C or right-click copy. Either of those are fine. And we'll paste it here. And well, what happened here? How come this isn't 100%? Well, remember, if you ever put in a $sign in front of a formula, when you copy and paste it, it will choose not to update the cell formatting. And that's the purpose of having the $sign in a cell reference. And so what we need to remember to do is to change to the number that we actually want to divide by. And now we have 100% when I hit the Enter key. All right, and we'll copy and paste that to here. And when we change this to cell E19, you probably see what's going to happen. We have an error. Well, we can't divide by 0. So what we need to do with this formula is to ensure that if there's a possibility that what we're dividing by is 0, that we do a check for that. And the way to do that, just like you would in Excel, is to use an if statement. If the cell value is 0, then do something. Otherwise, you can go ahead and do the division. So just like you would in Excel, equals if, or what's our condition that we want to check for? If $19 is equal to 0, then, comma, what do we want to do if it's 0? Well, we don't want to do the division. We want to do something else. So maybe we want to just do 0 instead of actually doing some sort of calculation. So if what we're about to divide by is 0, then just output 0. If it's not, then you can go ahead and do the calculation. Close bracket. So now we can see that output 0. And then when I expand, you can see that also has the appropriate calculation here. And collapse. And then I'd probably want to do this if to all of these other statements as well, but you get the idea. So those are just some potential things that you need to watch out for if you're doing a formula that refers to a cell in a different row, and also watching out in case you're doing division-type formulas where 0 could be a potential divisor. Just a couple more things I'd like to highlight before, let's say that you'd be interested in putting in a company logo. Oops, duplicate column here. Let's say that you're interested in putting in the company logo into, say, maybe the top right-hand corner of your form. In order to insert a company logo, it's very simple. Just go to the Edit menu and Insert Graphic. And you can choose from a number of different graphical formats. You can pick bitmaps or JPEGs. You can see that all the different possibilities here. And one thing that you need to watch out for is that if you are inserting logos, you need to watch out that if you shouldn't insert a logo into a single cell. We've got a pretty large logo here, and if I try to insert that logo into a single cell, watch what happens. Boom, it resized the cell to fit the logo, and in this case that's not what was desirable. So I'll Control-Z to undo that. If you want to be able to insert a logo into a form, what you first need to do is to highlight 2 or more cells that you want the approximate size of your logo. And then you need to merge all those cells together and insert a logo into that merged area. So if I right-click and you want to merge cells together, that's what the Cover Cells function is available for. So if I cover those cells together, now what we've done is we've merged all those cells together. And click on there, Edit, Insert Graphic, and Logo. Now you can see what's happened is that the logo has been resized to fit the merged cells rather than the cell resizing to fit the logo. So that's a way to identify that this is about the approximate size that I want to have my logo appear, and then that's a way that you can have a little more control over it. And when I preview that, then that will appear as appropriate on our form. The last thing I'd like to investigate in our last few minutes of the day is to show you how to verify the information on a financial statement to ensure that you've got the appropriate number of accounts and that they're in the right place, and also to ensure that you don't have duplicate accounts. So before we go on to that, I'd just be curious to know from the people in the audience today whether this is something that you've actually done before. So for those of you who are in the audience, if you can just let me know if you had the opportunity to use verification for a financial statement before. Okay, so I think that's most people, so that's great to know. So for the people in the audience today, some of you have used it before, but for the big majority, this will be something new for you. So this is good to know that we're get a chance to show some new topics. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new balance sheet. That's typically a place where we want to ensure that you've got all of your accounts and then they're in the right place. So we'll open up our View Account Groups, and we'll highlight the balance sheet and create a brand new form. Let's just clear all of our selections, and we'll put in just the current balance. So a very simple form. And when we create our financial statement here, we take a look at it, we can see that our total assets does not equal our total liability. So we know that something's wrong. Likely we're missing accounts, but it's probably interesting to find out exactly what's going on. So there's 2 different ways that you can verify accounts. There's a manual way, which is easy to do, or there's a way that you can code it into the form, which is a little more difficult, but then it's automatic. So I'll just show you the easy way to start with. What you can do is you can go to the View menu and Chart of Accounts. And from here, what you can do is that if you right-click on a form, right-click anywhere, you can choose to verify the report, which means just check your entire chart of accounts to see whether accounts are missing or duplicated. When I choose that, what you'll now see is that a bunch of green dots appear, and those are accounts that are represented in our form. And we've got a number of accounts with red X's that indicate that those accounts are missing. And one or more of those missing accounts is likely the cause for our out-of-balance balance sheet. So once we've identified that those accounts are missing, what I can do is I can click them and multi-select them if required. You can use Control or Alt Shift-click or Control Control-click in order to select all the accounts and place them into the appropriate sections as necessary. You can do them one at a time or all at once, depending what's easy for you. So let's just say that all these are current assets. We'll, select them. And the last one that you selected is the place where you drag. There's a little bit of a sort of a dotted line around the last one that you selected. You click on that and drag it and drop it to where the appropriate account group is and range in column B. And you'll see that it's created the specific row. And now when I, that's what happens when we only have so much real estate. Now when I press F9 to refresh, now we can see that our chart of accounts are now balanced. So if we want to just ensure that everything is all right, we can right-click and reset, right-click and re-verify again. Now we've got all the green dots here, not only for all of our balance sheet accounts, all of our income statement accounts are good, and our retained earnings account. So that's great. Just to show you what happens if an account is duplicated, let's just change this number here so we can see that account 1500 is duplicated. And if I right-click and say verify, if an account appears more than once on a form, you'll see a blue exclamation mark appear. Now, you can't obviously drag and drop this because that will always add. What it just means that you need to look through your financial statement and look for account 1500 where it potentially could appear in the account ranges. And then you might recognize, oh, this is a place where I want to make a change, so I'll make the change here. And then reset and verify to ensure that things are okay. So this is an automatic and pretty easy way, or sorry, a manual but fairly easy way to identify whether an account has been replicated or is missing. But it is something that you have to go and do. What you might want to do is to have it built into the financial statement so that not only will it warn you on screen, but and built-in verification will also pop up a message of missing accounts when you print it or preview it or export it to Excel. So if you've added new accounts and you want to be sure that they belong in this particular form, then you can build this into the financial statement. So let me just edit this just so that those missing accounts are now there. What you can do in a financial statement, specifically a smart sheet, is to build in automatic verification. How you do this is to, first of all, in column A, above all the rows where your amounts and your accounts are formed, right-click and choose something here called make.verify. Or you can just simply type in period verify into the cell in column A. What this will do is we'll say in every row below that dot verify, it will start checking to ensure that accounts are there. Well, what accounts do you want to check for? Well, right next door in column B, which is reserved for your accounts, you specify all the accounts that you want to be able to show in your balance sheet. So maybe we can show all of our numeric accounts. Now when I print or preview the form, and I'll preview it, it will automatically pop up, oh, wait a second, there's particular accounts that we're missing. And so now you need to put them in the appropriate place. And so if I put them in preview, now since all the accounts are there, it will preview. And I need to press F9 to have those amounts update. So now when I preview, the total assets and liabilities are now matching. You can also, if you're just working on the spec, you can right-click on the dot verify cell, and there'll be an option here that says verify range. And if everything's okay, it will tell you so. If something is missing or duplicated, and I right-click and verify range, it will give you a message. In this case, it tells you that the second instance of this duplicated account, 1500, was found in cell B14. So this gives you a little bit more information about the duplicated account, that not only is 1500 the duplicated account, but one of the duplications is in cell B14, the second instance. The other duplication is somewhere above row 14. So then you can go ahead and make changes as required. Now, if the duplication or happen to be in the liability section, of course that's also a problem. You may not want to have, you want to ensure that not only is the account there, but you also have to ensure that it's in the right section. You want all of your asset accounts in the asset groups, and the liabilities in the liabilities area, and your P&L in the appropriate section, so you want to get the appropriate numbers. So what you can do is you can add in multiple verification lines associated with the appropriate accounts that you want to check for. So let's say that you want to verify that all of your asset accounts could be up to 1999. We'll just copy that. Then we want our liabilities, paste, to be somewhere from 2000 to 39.99. That includes the shareholders' equity. And then we can also ensure that the profit and loss is somewhere from 4,000 to 99.99. So what we've done is we've added 3 different verify lines, and this verification will check all the way from here to the next row, and then this verify will check from here all the way to the next verify row, and so on and so forth. So you can have as many or a few of those as you require to ensure that accounts appear not only somewhere on the form, but also in appropriate sections. So now if I were to right-click on Verify Arrange, it will say B9 was found from all the rows from 9 to 22. Go from OK. The accounts in cell B22 made it all the way down to the bottom to row 27, and then all the accounts in B27 are OK. So if you want to ensure that if you regularly add new accounts on a regular basis, that they've been added to the form, first, just make sure that your account ranges are okay. That can accommodate that. But you can also add verification to ensure that accounts are set up on the form, are not duplicated, and appear in the appropriate place. So hopefully that's a nice trick to be able to ensure that your chart of accounts are set up the way that you want, and also that your form will enable new accounts to be automatically added. So that's the last little bit we want to talk about with verification. So I think we've covered everything we want to today.